So if someone is interested in making the transition then towards powerlifting, maybe they want to do their first competition, or they even want to just, set the goal that they just want to start focusing more on that specific type of training. How would you say, someone should begin making that transition from, let's say, general bodybuilding, or body composition type of program? They're doing their 3 sets of 12, etc. Yeah, they do some squatting, but it's not specific. How does someone make that transition?
I think the first thing to do is get a coach. It's one of those, like, it's not like train for hypertrophy, or where you're just kind of showing up to the gym and you could maybe follow a program online.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of small bits that even when I started in powerlifting, I wouldn't have thought about before, like, choosing the appropriate equipment, learning all the rules of the sport, you know, even the case of, giving somebody what weights to hit for a certain week, or not necessarily needing to redline it every single week. Like, you can read about this stuff online, but until you're kind of guided through that process, it's very difficult to implement. And even with that, having a coach definitely helps you keep out your own head and set expectations. Having huge expectations for first powerlifting meet is often a bad idea, because the kind of first powerlifting competition you do is going to be something that you just look to get a total. You just want to go to meet on the day. You want to have fun. You want to get to know people who are in the community, because the community is fantastic. And it should be a fun opportunity. It's not meant to be about competing on your very first day and, like, winning the thing. Learning that your first squat is going to be the most nerve-wracking squat of your life, and then after that, the rest of the day is going to be quite fun. And having somebody there to guide you through that process, and kind of even on the day, helping you with, like, your weight selections, helping you with your warm-ups, putting talcum powder in your legs, like, all of that stuff really does help. And it's something that there are a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily think about if you're just going through the process on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, especially if you're going to do a competition, you don't want to just roll up on your own and not have any guidance, no one telling you what weights to choose, or saying, your second attempt looked fast, add 5 kilos or whatever. And again, that other point regarding just aiming to go 9 for 9 is probably what you want to do in your first comp more than anything else. Like, get your lifts in. Don't be trying to say, oh, you know what, that second attempt, that was good. I'm gonna add 15 kilos for an all-time PR. Like, that'll come. It'll come. And ultimately, I think just getting that exposure is probably the most important part. Now, I'm no powerlifting expert, but I've had a couple of people go to their first meets, and I think that if you just conservative with your selection, you make your first attempt way easier than you think you need to. That's just going to make the whole process a lot smoother, I think.
Yeah, and, like, realistically, even, like, when it comes to openers, you're going to be lifting weights that you've done multiple times in training. It's really just to get a number up on board, because if, like, with the example of your first squat being the most nerve-wracking thing, if you miss that, then you are very, very close to bombing, because now the nerves are doubling as you go into that second attempt, and that, coupled with the fact that you could potentially not be able to complete the meet, that you've trained so hard for, is I dread to be in that situation. I even had to have this conversation with a client recently who's looking to compete in his first competition, and he was asking me about, like, how would I go about attempt selection, or what I would perceive his attempt selection to be. But it's so far away that I couldn't really give any kind of accurate kind of estimations. But I suppose he was under the impression that with the 3 attempts, it's essentially a max effort attempt on each selection, which, if you did that, like, it'd be pretty impressive if you finished the day 9 for 9.
Yeah.
But it'd be very difficult to do. If anybody's ever maxed out in a squat, even just doing that for 1 rep, never mind doing it for 3 times, and then you have to do deadlifts at the end, is pretty intense. And the day of a powerlifting meet as well, it's a day that's full of adrenaline, full of caffeine. Like anytime I've ever done a powerlifting meet, I felt like I've just been out for an entire weekend because like it's very difficult to sleep after it because of all the caffeine, but you're getting such adrenaline dumps throughout the day, so it's definitely something that you would have to have guidance through.
But you'd recommend it for someone who's interested. Like, it doesn't have to be this big intimidating thing that I should only compete if I'm at a certain level. Like, there's no specific entry point for most local meets. Like, it's not a big deal.
No, I think if it's something that you would be interested in doing, I'd say 100% do it. It's fun. Like, I mean, it's such an interesting kind of sport in the sense that, like, if you look at a bodybuilding show, or even just any other sport, generally if somebody on the opposing team is competing or doing their shot, like, there could be silence or there could be boos.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're at a powerlifting meet, every single person who's there wants you to get the lift, even the person that you're competing against, which is amazing. Like, the people who would be lifting the lightest weights of the day, like, everybody would be on their feet, like, clapping and cheering for them when they get the lift. So it's a interesting environment and an incredibly supportive one.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to point out, because I think a lot of people do get anxious because of the stereotype of the sport, I guess. Like, you think of like these quiet, aggressive lifters who are just on their own path, lone wolves, and don't want to support anyone else. But that's not the reality when you go to a powerlifting meet. As you say, you're getting encouraged by others. So it's not like you need to go there and be super worried that no one's going to talk to you or no one's going to give you a hand. And I mean, I've been to a couple of meets where people have showed up with no coaches, no guidance, and as long as someone has the time, they'd be more than happy to, step in and give you a hand if they're not working with another person at the same time. So it is a nice environment. So if you're thinking of doing your first meet and you're worried about it or you don't think you're good enough, just go ahead and do it. And of course, we would recommend that you get a coach, and in particular that you get coached by Shane, because he's the man and he'll be able to guide you to your first meet. So with all of that said, Shane, if someone does want to work with you, do you have coaching spaces available at the moment? Do they have to be a certain level of strength to work with you? I know the answer, but
no, yeah, I do have coaching spaces available. So if you are interested in just dipping your feet into like strength training, like, do give me a message. Even if it's going to be a mixture of body composition and strength, as we've discussed in the podcast, your program doesn't have to be entirely strength based. Like, you can have a bit elements of power building into it as well. And like, even I would have just general fat loss clients who just dip their feet into strength training too. It's an aspect of training that kind of gives you a good bit of empowerment, because you get to see what your body can do. I think that's a huge element of kind of what I try to get through to clients is, let's stop focusing as much on even things like body composition, your fat loss, your weight. Like, let's appreciate what your body can do. And I think that's a really good kind of part of something like powerlifting. Like, there's weight classes for every individual, and it's so varied, sizes big and small, and everybody's catered towards, and it's really just right. This is what your body's capable of. Let's maximize it. So yeah, if that's you, do give me a shout. And yeah, look forward to speak to you.